I'm Maria Schwartz along with Rachel Galligan, and welcome to the Winsidr show where it's all about the W. Game two of the WNBA semifinals for both series did not disappoint. They're even now, so let's dive into it. If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community, patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to see our amazing staff's written content over at winsidr.com. That's winsidr.com. Download the episode, it helps us out. I don't have to say the rest of it. If you want to sponsor an episode or something else in regards to Winsidr, hit us up. Email us at info@winsidr.com. Rachel, we're back. I'm sorry for the listeners. We don't have a cool, amazing guest like Pokey Chapman this episode, but maybe I won't ruin anything. But we expect to have a cool guest for our next one. But just kind of gut reaction, chatting about the series is. Um, let's start with the Sky Sun, right? Because those have been the earlier games. That's the East Coast teams, or as it would be, I guess the Sun able to even the score. And early on in the game, it almost looked like Chicago was going to be able to run away with this. And as we talked about, winning this game too, if you're Chicago, and James Wade was very open about this, he spoke about this at length in many press conferences and interviews that I heard him in, where he was like, look, this is not a series. We have a do or die game tonight. And
Mhm.
I loved that approach. Obviously, whether or not the approach had something to do with the loss, the end of the story is they lost. It would have been so impactful and almost season over for the Connecticut Sun if Chicago was able to pull it off, but they weren't. What was your reaction to that game?
Yeah, I mean, it's like both teams probably had that approach. I mean, Connecticut, I'm sure, approached that game like, we have got to get this win at home before we then go straight to Chicago for two. Like, this is a must win. There's no if, ands, or buts about it. And I mean, I just think that this was a Connecticut team that definitely it still wasn't like the best we've seen them play. I mean, obviously it was the best that we've seen Alyssa Thomas play in the few short games she's played this year, and I'm sure we'll get to her in a second. But I think with Connecticut, they definitely seemed more like themselves on the defensive end of the floor, especially what they were able to do to Chicago in that second half. I mean, held to just 9 points in the fourth quarter. I mean, Connecticut they were just dominant in that fourth quarter. A lot of it had to do with the play of Alyssa Thomas, who was so efficient on every aspect of the game. I just, and you can't help but wonder, at moments in that second half, I'm looking at Chicago wondering, like, are they truly, is the tank empty? Is kind of what it kind of started to look like a little bit. Where Connecticut was able to separate themselves not just with how good they are defensively, but just the fresh legs they had underneath them a little bit. Chicago did not have anywhere near as many runouts, transition points as we were used to seeing, and I think that you have to give Connecticut credit for that, but at the same time, you got to wonder how much does fatigue play a role in that.
Yeah, at what point does it start to kick in? I was a big believer in, and it's interesting because I've actually talked to players about this. I think like a few years ago, I actually talked to Diana Taurasi about this, where I asked her about the playing back to backs or playing with only 1 day's rest and stuff like that, and she essentially said, like, honestly, you almost feel better in the second game because your body's more warmed up, your body is just more awake, ready to handle it, and I always, took that with a slight grain of salt. But, going into this game, I thought Chicago finally had a true rest day. Now I expected them to be more energetic even while everyone else was like, no, there's no way this is going to happen. Obviously that rest day, if anything slowed down, made their bodies kind of be tricked and think, okay, we don't have to play for a little bit longer. The the interesting part for me, and I feel bad for Chicago Sky fans because you and I jinxed Diamond DeShields because she was looking great early in the game on both sides of
Mm-hmm.
the ball and
Yeah.
then just completely fell off, closing into the fashion that we've seen from her honestly throughout this season.
Yeah.
What was more shocking to you? And I say this semi in jest, but was it more shocking to see the reduced minutes and effectiveness of Jonquel Jones? She was in the plus minus, she was a -9, okay? But or was it more impressive to see Jasmine Thomas really get going early and be impactful in the way that we've been kind of begging her to be?
I feel like, Kurt Miller had talked about how Jasmine Thomas is usually good for like one really one really big game in a series, and honestly, I wouldn't even say that that was like a really big game. I mean, she finished with 12 points. I just think she kind of took a lot of that offensive burden early on and hit some early shots that gave Connecticut some momentum. So I just think it was a really solid performance by Jasmine. It's not like, look, if you look at her stat line, she was efficient. She did what she has done countless times throughout the season. I think the more shocking thing was kind of JJ a little bit, and people talked about the physicality of that game. It was extremely extremely intense, and I don't know if she got knocked in the head or something happened. I saw some kind of whispers about that don't seem to be too concerning. Knock on wood, at least at this point. But I just think it wasn't her night. Like, Chicago was going to make somebody else beat them, and they were going to be extremely physical with JJ, and they were going to be there on the catch and make her catch it 10 to 12 feet off the block. And they made adjustments. They were going to make someone else on Connecticut step up and make shots. And to Connecticut's credit, Alyssa Thomas played a really big role in that and super efficient. And a lot of people were kind of talking about saying, yeah, it's kind of her breakout game of the year. You knew it was going to happen if she could get her legs underneath her a little bit. But for me, I think, a little bit of a quiet night for JJ, just 4 points, 2 of 9. It just wasn't her night. And that was probably the more shocking thing to
But
me.
my question is, Rachel, and and it's not even necessarily like my question. This is more like me speaking for the people. And I'm not saying you're representing Kurt Miller here. You're representing all coaches in the world here, Rachel. So
Okay.
choose your words wisely. No, just, she's the MVP, right?
Of
She
course.
has played amazing. Maybe there's been maybe one other game this season. I would have to go look. From my understanding, no, especially just like based off the cuff memory.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Is the it like what is the point where you say, okay, I'm pulling this player for someone better versus saying, okay, she's the MVP. If we're going to win the finals, it's going to be because of her and we need to run through her? Or is it, a sense of a coach saying, look, at the end of the day, I don't care we don't care about MVP. We care about winning the finals.
I think that's the interesting part, right? Like, you were kind of texting me like, what's going on with JJ? She's playing just very limited minutes. I think, and I haven't heard, I haven't talked with Kurt. I haven't read anything about kind of those decisions that went into that. Was it truly was she banged up a little bit on her head? Was it truly just a feel of, this is not her night, and Kurt could sense that early on. I think anything and everything is possible. I don't know the answers to that. My gut reaction just watching it as someone who was completely on the outside looking in, it felt like early on, Connecticut did not have a fast start, and Kurt threw in his bench early on, and that bench was the one that really had some momentum going, right?
Right?
They kind of kept Connecticut in it. I mean, you gotta give credit to Beatrice Montpremier, who gave really solid minutes. Only played 6, but those were 6 pivotal minutes early on in the game. Hit a shot. I mean, so deep in that bench, it was almost like an energy thing or a challenging thing. Whatever that was, it was some sort of coach's intuition that I think Miller had, and I don't think it's a negative thing. I don't. Sometimes it's your night. Sometimes you got to dive deep into that bench and have them give you something that maybe isn't you haven't seen out on the floor quite yet. That's what I saw, and I think
Specifically from Connecticut. I mean,
exactly,
like, if
exactly.
Rachel, if I told you going into this game, Jonquel Jones is going to have 4 points, and there's going to be 3 players who had 19 or more minutes off the bench for
Yeah.
Connecticut. What do you think they win that game? No.
No, no, and that's the crazy thing. That just really is a credit to how I think to how well Kurt Miller knows his team, and how bought in everyone across the board for this Connecticut Sun team is. That how difficult is it? Montpremier hadn't played to come in and give valuable minutes, and have, when her name was called, was able to come in and do what she did, and have that amount of minutes for players who aren't used to playing those types of minutes. I think it was really, I haven't seen enough people talk about it, to be honest with you, and I'm really credit to you for picking up on it, especially as early as you did. It's really fascinating, that especially we're talking about a team that all year we were concerned about the depth. So really, really great job. I mean, talk about when your name is called and being able to answer the bell. That was a phenomenal job across the board for Connecticut on a night where, yeah, your MVP it's not her night, and so everyone else needed to step up and fill that role. Yes, you can talk about Alyssa Thomas, and she looked as good as she has, is in pure Alyssa Thomas form, but everybody else contributed just a little bit more to kind of make up for, the night that Jones had. And I think that that's a positive. I don't look at any of this as a negative, or I'm not concerned about Jonquel Jones. She'll bounce back. I fully anticipate she'll be fine.
That's the thing. I'm not in any way concerned about Jonquel. Like what does that mean
Yeah.
for her going forward? Because look, at the end of the day, I am a huge believer, and I don't care. Like individual awards are lovely and all, but the goal is to get a championship, right? If the
Mhm.
goal is to get a championship, you're not focusing on these individual things. You're not focusing on, oh, you know what I mean? Like you have to treat Jonquel as much as, big fan, and
Sure.
I know she's a humble leader or whatever, but at the end of the day, it comes down to you need to do what's right to win the game. And in the same sense of if it was Dwana Bonner, Breon January, anybody else in this team, if they're struggling, you pull them, and if the player who goes in for them is playing well, you go with the hot hand. The
Sure.
aspect that I don't think is getting enough credit, and I want people to understand the history of this when I give credit to Kurt Miller, is historically Kurt Miller goes at most like 7 deep, right? Like at most, and we're talking about like even in overtime games, the guy does not go very deep into his bench. The really interesting aspect for me is, we're looking at this roster. Yeah, he has some young players, but so rarely in the WNBA do we talk about, progression of a player and truly a team committing to young players to build them up for the long term. And that is what Connecticut has done,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
they drafted these players. Yes, they got more minutes last year due to injuries, due to all of this craziness, and this player's injured, that player's out for the season, whatever it is. But at the end of the day, like we have to give credit to Kurt Miller for. I don't know if like this was a long con by him to say I'm never going to do really deep players, but now I'm going to go deep, or if now he finally has that confidence in these players because he's been around them. They've been around the block with this team for at least a couple of years for the most part, and now he has that faith, he has that trust.
Yeah. I mean, I think it goes a long way to the cohesion of this team. And I think everything you're saying is exactly on par. And again, we're looking at this as complete outsiders. We're not in those practices. We are not in those locker rooms, on those trips. I think that um, I've always said I've known Kurt a very long time, even before he coached in the WNBA, and I have always had the utmost respect for him and just his basketball mind, and but not just that, just his intuition and his ability to lead a team and make that team, build a team that works well together, and I think that you do see aspects of that in moments like last night where honestly you look at the box sheet, you look at some of these numbers, you look at, like you said all these players that have played all this minutes, would we have predicted them to win that game, and on the flip side of that, not to change the subject too much, but like if you're Chicago, you've got to be sitting here thinking like, damn, we let one go. Like our game
Mhm.
plan was to keep the MVP. We hold her to 4 points. She makes 2 shots all night, plays 24 minutes. I feel pretty good about our chances if we can just take care of business. You can't help but wonder that Chicago probably feels a little bit disappointed about that.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, let's be real. You have to be disappointed. You have to be upset at their shooting percentages.
I just want
They
to
looked
know, like,
exhausted I
yeah,
mean,
what did you see in the second half? I mean, it just it I there you know, there were a couple little bunnies, like, little easy shots. There was an offensive, rebound putback that Diamond DeShields point blank missed, and I'm like, "My god, she missed a couple of those," and, even if you just get 1 or 2 of those to fall, like, it just gives you a little bit more, just
I think
confidence,
that's the
momentum.
Rachel, that's the positive approach, but I will say, I think I would build off of that, and I would say that what I saw in the second half was it didn't start off as a tired team, right? Like, this is a team that it reminds me of a quote I saw from Courtney Williams early on in the season about the Atlanta Dream, where she was talking to the team and she basically said, like, when we make shots, we hustle back on defense and we play with energy. We get that juice from making the shot. But when we're not making the shots, we lose all our energy. And I think we are in a point in the season for the Mercury, for the Sky, that if you let your body rest at any point during the game, if you're not constantly pushing yourself, like,
Sure.
it's like running a marathon. If you just stop in the middle for 5 minutes, getting back going, it's going to take a while. You're going to lose a few miles. You're going to lose, some easy baskets. And eventually it was the snowball effect of missing some shots, then not having energy. And then slowly your body starts to think, oh, this is
Mm,
a cool down. We should be tired.
yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I
real
think more
quick,
than anything, you credit Connecticut. They looked more of their true selves. I think, if nothing else, on the defensive end of the floor, and that is what's gotten them to this point. Now we go back to Chicago. Obviously, that's going to be a big one on Sunday. A couple days rest. Lot of talk about the travel and these poor women, and the things that they have to do just to even get out of Connecticut and get to Chicago is insane.
ridiculous.
But I think, this is a big opportunity for Chicago, headed in, this next one, and how they bounce back from this.
That's
Um,
what I want to know, Rachel, is before we move on to the next game, I think it's pretty clear. We've talked about it, what the keys are for Connecticut. What can Chicago do to bounce back and get this victory?
they've got to do a better job on the glass. You're not going to beat Connecticut by getting out rebounded by 13 the way you did. I saw way too many shots go up. And you know what? Chicago didn't shoot great. They went through a lot of lulls, but I saw way too many shot attempts, especially the three ball, where there was not one or two people attacking the offensive glass. Being able to get yourself second and third chance opportunities, or second and third looks at the basket. I mean, you and then keeping Connecticut off the glass. I mean, the rebounding numbers are huge. Connecticut had 12 offensive rebounds, and I think Chicago did a good job of taking care of the basketball. And the two biggest things James Wade talked about: rebounding and turnovers. And I just think that if you break it down to one stat that really has got to get figured out on Sunday, it's the rebounding numbers.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. Yeah, I'd say both teams have definitely have that circled. Let's do a quick prediction for this game. I'll
Oof.
go first. It's a tough one. But here's the thing, I want to go Sky, but I have seen too much of this streakiness, and right now the streak is downward trending. So I gotta go Sun. What about you?
I gotta just make a point how much I love this matchup. I don't ever want it to end.
It's so fun.
Yeah, because it's like any night, it almost feels like it could be a bit of a coin flip. I really think that the Sun, we're 2 games into this series. They have yet to look their best. I think they started to show flashes of that as a whole in the second half last night or the other night. I think Connecticut's really going to be take that next step and kind of be clicking on all cylinders on Sunday. I'm going Sun as well.
All right, let's move on to the next
The most
matchup.
ridiculous game of the season so
Um,
far.
wow. Here's the thing. I'm just sitting here. Not too many picked the Mercury to even win a game in this series. I'm just sitting here. I picked, the big cash out, and I just want to remind everyone.
Hey, I said
I
they
picked.
were going to win one. I said they were
Yeah,
going to
you said you were like the only other person I saw even picking them to win a game. I'm sitting here feeling pretty good about myself after that 6 point loss and then a complete blowout of the Aces. Now, do I expect Diana Taurasi to drop 37
win. My
again and
God.
again and again? No, but what I did see was next level Brittany Griner. And if Brittany Griner can continue to play the game that she's been playing, excuse me, over the past few months since the All-Star slash Olympic break, I don't know how you can pick a team against her. She is dominating Asia Wilson. She is dominating Liz Cambage. She's dominating anyone who has the gall, the audacity to challenge her. I'm going with the Mercury again. I'm going to start off my thoughts on this game with a prediction. But what was your thoughts about that
My
game?
God. just just I mean, that's just one of those moments that, like, we talk about this game years from now. It's like 117 points, like, and they stayed on pace the entire game. That was the funny
Hmm.
part. I really felt like, okay, they're gonna. There's no way they keep shooting. At one point they were shooting 84%, like deep into the first half, and I was like,
It was
there's no way.
ridiculous.
Like they're gonna come down to earth at some point, and Vegas is gonna chip into this thing because if any team in the league can come back down 20 and win, it's, in my opinion, Las Vegas. And
Yeah.
I just kind of waited for that moment to happen. It never happened. Like, Vegas would go hit a big shot, and then Phoenix would come down and Taurasi would throw up some ridiculous three, and like you could literally see the shoulders kind of slouch down for Vegas. Like it was just dagger after dagger after dagger. I mean, it was a complete onslaught. Probably one of the most vicious offensive performances I've ever seen in terms of just completely taking the wind out of a team. Like anytime you tried to go on a run or get a stop, like it just wasn't happening. So I think for me, and that's just outside of Taurasi's performance. I mean, my God, that alone we'll be talking about for years. But I mean, just as a whole, Phoenix just, they talked about it. They said this is a single elimination game. They came out immediately with that sense of urgency that they had to have. And on top of that, you're shooting unbelievably, completely lights out, 61% on the game, 54% from the 3-point line. I mean, it was just a fun game to witness as a fan, a basketball fan that just, it's like one of those unconscious moments where you're like, this team cannot do anything wrong right now. So I thought that it was amazing. Is that sustainable? Absolutely not. So, like, I think if you're Vegas, you're just kind of like holy shit. And I think it's funny, like, some people were talking about the refs, and we don't get the respect that we want, and I'm sure a lot of that is just to kind of act it up and get calls for the next round. But I'm like,
Because that works, which
you
is
gave up
just ridiculous.
117 points.
It has nothing to do with the refs. Here's my thing. Like, first of all, they kept on pace, and we talked about this going into the fourth. I was like, all right, there's two things that could happen. The Mercury go into classic Mercury fashion. They go completely cold, and the Aces just kind of chug along and make it back into it because they ended up getting close. Not close in that sense, but close if the Mercury didn't score all fourth quarter, basically.
Mhm.
Um, but then I texted you and I was like, nah, DT's just gonna, run up the score. And they just kept doing it. And honestly, underrated aspect, Bria Hartley, a player who was having an insane season last year, then gets injured, and is just coming back, hasn't really been full strength yet during this season. And it's been tough to get her minutes now that she is healed and they want to get her back in the role of things. When you're up that much in a playoff game, you put a good player in like
Yeah,
that
honestly,
and
I'm
you save
surprised.
yourself.
Yeah, I'm surprised she didn't get to play a little bit more. It kind of felt like I would have probably pulled people a little bit earlier, but
Classic Sandy.
who am I? Who am I? I am not Sandy Brondello, and I am not going to claim to be that good at my job. So I just think that it was just fun. I mean, you had the starters. Nobody played over 30 minutes. So at the end of the day, that's always a positive. To do what you did in that amount of time and get into your bench a little bit was going to be big. And now they get to go back to Phoenix, and play in front of the X Factor, not in their normal gym because we all know that they always get kicked out of their own gym. But I think that the response is going to be interesting. I mean, Kelsey Plum, my God, I mean, she's the best player on Las Vegas right now. You know,
Yeah.
still had, what was it, one, two, three, four, six players in double figures for Las Vegas. It's like, I like this matchup too. I don't ever want it to end. I still think it'll go to 4. I just think at some point Phoenix
Cools off.
cools off. Yeah, and not that I want to say reality sets in because they were incredible last night, and this is a really good team, but I still hold true to what I've said for since the beginning of the series. Like Las Vegas should win this. They really should. And I expect them to kind of Phoenix to come back down to earth, literally, and Las Vegas
No,
to be able to bounce
that's not
back.
the Mercury are staying out of Earth. Sorry. All I'm gonna say is I want everybody to be aware that I pick the Mercury when they win.
You're calling it. You are predicting that Phoenix is going to win this series. I mean,
Phoenix is going to the finals.
okay,
I've been saying this all season long that and
I would
like
love it.
right, like the Aces are an underwhelming team. Who's the like we know Asia Wilson's the leader, but Liz is back, and like at what point is Chelsea Gray's like lack of ability to take over a game truly like late in the play, like Chelsea Gray, I'm giving her the ball when I need a last second shot, right? Like I'm running the offense through her fine, but like there's so many question marks on this where I look at the Mercury and I say the question marks aren't about roles. The question marks aren't about, anything other than are you going to shoot and make the percentage of shots that is expected of you
Sure,
historically in your career. And if the Mercury do that, right? Like Diana Taurasi, she's a playoff player. Skylar Diggins Smith is going to, distribute the ball and get buckets. And Brittany Griner is playing the best basketball of anybody in the league right now.
sure.
So like, I don't know. Yeah, it's a hot take because the Aces are stacked and like honestly,
I mean,
like yeah. Go ahead.
after last night's performance, like, my God, what is this team capable of? I mean, if we're going to talk about Chicago clicking at the right time, why aren't we talking about Phoenix clicking at the right
Mm-hmm.
time? I mean, this team is more than capable. They've got 3 Olympians on it. The question has always been depth for me. And do they have enough pieces around these 5 starters to sustain that in a series? That's what it comes down to me.
Yeah,
But hey,
100%.
I'm not leaving off the table. I will. That's an amazing take, and I'll be very interested. This will be one of your greatest accomplishments if you get this right.
Right. Right. Well, then let me just ask you. I've already made my pick for tonight. Well, real quick, is there anything specific, any specific stat line that fans should look to, or something that you're seeing and you think, what, this is going to be the key thing? We know rebounding is key for the other series. What about this one?
I just really think you got to pay attention to Las Vegas defensively and the sense of urgency that they play with. I was really underwhelmed with their ability to contest shots the other night. Now, felt like Phoenix was literally throwing it into the ocean, but there were so many times where Tarazi was coming off a ball screen, and if you give her space, she's going to let it fly. And I felt like whoever was hedging that ball screen, a couple times it was Liz Cambage, stayed a little bit back, was too far back, didn't step up and contest the shot the way it needed to be contested. I just was not impressed with Las Vegas and their defensive effort. And that's not to say that a team can't just be unconscious and hit everything that they throw up, that Phoenix did. But what type of resistance are you giving this team? And I think that they could have been so much better in their ball screen action. I think that they could have contested shots a lot more efficiently. That sense of urgency was not there on the defensive end. That's the number one thing I'm going to pay attention to.
Yeah, well, I think it's funny though because when we talk about, I mean, this is an elite defensive team, right? Everyone was all up in arms that this team didn't have
Yeah.
anyone on the all defensive teams, and then they lay this egg. Yeah, it's just no, it's hilarious. This is a really good defensive team. They did not show it at all, and if you're not showing that intensity, you're gonna lose to the Mercury. I
Yep.
think the best quote that I've seen throughout all the playoffs so far was from Bill Laimbeer saying that I know she's not injured. She will cut your heart out in a second. And I'm going to end the episode on that
Love
because
it.
I think it is so true and loving. Reminder, Winsidr is your one-stop shop for all your WNBA news and conversation, but we can't do without your help. Become a subscriber at patreon.com/Winsidr. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the WNBA.